The following program is brought to you in living color.
Hi, I'm Tony Figueroa, the child of television, and welcome to another edition of This Week in TV History. For this edition, I need help. That's why I brought my beautiful wife, Donna Allen-Figueroa, along.
Hi.
By the way, you could hear us both on TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television, and you can read my blog, childoftelevision.blogspot.com. And today I wanted to discuss the 55th anniversary of the half-hour comedy, That Girl. You love the show.
I love the show.
I was introduced to the show when I moved to Los Angeles. I was 7 years old. It was on our local channel 11, KTTV, and it was in between I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show. I thought it was funny, but I guess maybe as a guy it didn't speak to me. But the show spoke to you.
Very much. When the show aired in 1966 on a Thursday night, this is important because in my house there was no television on school nights. I heard a lot of my friends talking about the show, about that girl, this girl. They were excited. I remember during that fall, I might have caught my mother watching it down in her room. And I remember seeing the images of Anne-Marie Marlowe Thomas on the streets of New York. And it was just exciting. I really got into the show a few years later. I was a little bit older when That Girl became part of ABC's morning lineup. During the summer, I finally got to watch That Girl. And the show resonated with me for a number of reasons. First off, I've always said to Tony and Ed Robertson on TV Confidential that when I was growing up, there were very few girls on television. I mean, think about it. I mean, Saturday night, My Three Sons, Lassie's owner was a boy, and it just seemed that it was
So when you say girl, you mean young girl.
I mean,
so Ginger and Marianne don't count.
that is a whole nother
That's
story.
a whole other
That's
thing.
a whole nother story. But I guess girls in domestic settings, and maybe that's not the right word, but let's look at women in television. Most of the women on television were housewives. I adore Lucille Ball on I Love Lucy.
But she was a housewife.
She was a housewife. And
Laura Petrie.
Dick Van Dyke Show, one of the best television comedies ever made. Laura Petrie was very progressive for her time, but she was still a housewife. I will say that in her marriage, she was on an equal footing with her husband. I believe that.
As far as the domestic roles.
Yes.
Now, you did have Sally Rogers.
Who was a single career woman, but she was, I adore Rosemary, but I'm going to say it. She was an old maid. Always looking for a man. And if Sally Rogers ever would have gotten married on the Dick Van Dyke Show, I think she would have quit her job.
Okay, that was commonplace then.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, let's see, there were a few other career women on television during the 50s. Our Miss Brooks, who was Eve Arden, school teacher, always looking for a man. And let's face it, back in the 50s, female school teacher got married. They usually left. And a show that I'm not familiar with, Private Secretary.
And Southern. Yeah.
Who was a
another
working girl in a position that was normally held by a woman. So
basically the female professions that we knew would be teacher, nurse, or secretary.
Yes.
You didn't see them do anything beyond that.
No, and if I want to go to African-American women at that time, they were domestics.
They were domestic. Julia was the groundbreaking one.
Yes. Single woman, she was a widow.
She was She worked outside the home.
Yes.
And
that was still a few years after the groundbreaking That Girl. That Girl was the first time that, girls like me saw somebody like them on television. There were the cosmetic things, the hair, the makeup, the clothes. Oh, I wanted her wardrobe. I would wear some of her clothes now.
Okay.
That was one thing. That was a big thing, which probably If Anne Marie were a real actress living in New York at the time, she could not have afforded that wardrobe. But hey, television, fantasy. She had the perfect, cute little New York City apartment. Yeah, she probably could have afforded it with a few roommates. And she had the perfect boyfriend in Donald Hollinger, who had a glamorous job for Newsview magazines. He was a reporter.
Yeah, he was a reporter. He had a nice apartment, too.
Yes, he did. She had a pretty much perfect life. The most important thing, though, the thing that set her apart from any other woman on television, here was a young, single woman living on her own. In fact, ABC didn't know if the American public would buy this. I mean, Marlo Thomas had been seen by ABC. They wanted a vehicle for her and presented her with several scripts that were, I guess, run of the mill. And she actually said, how about doing a show like A Girl Like Me who wants to move away from home, wants to be an actress, whose parents have a problem with her living away from home? What about a show like that? And ABC executives asked, well, would anybody watch anything like that? And they even were trying to throw out other ideas to ground it. Well, what if she lived as a single woman with her little brother?
So she would be like a surrogate parent to the little brother.
I guess, and again, being put into surrogate mom role, I guess. Thankfully, she got her way as the single woman living in New York. Another reason I related to her, especially at a very young age, I knew I wanted to be an actress, and I loved her adventures as an actor in New York City. New York City.
And this was New York City of the 60s.
The optimistic 60s. Absolutely beautiful. I actually preferred the original opening with her on the streets of New York. It's just, New York is absolutely beautiful.
When you say the original, because I'm visualizing the little street signs.
Yes.
That said starring Marlo Thomas. Yeah,
exactly. In the first season.
Yes.
For some reason, I always liked that better. I think because I saw more of New York. And as a child, I was enamored of New York. My parents hated New York. Yeah, we went there a couple of times for a minute. I was in love with the city and the fact that my hero, Anne Marie, was living in New York on her own. She was living my life. I remember one morning I'm watching the show come on. I said, oh, Mom, isn't it wonderful? And she said, they filmed that in California. They filmed at Paramount.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of broke the illusion for me, but I still watched the show religiously. So I loved her adventures as an actress, but not all of them had to do with her career, relationships. She did date a few guys other than Donna Allen-Figueroa.
Donna, but she always went back to Donald.
Yes, she did. I mean, they never completely broke up, but as was cited in several episodes by other people, well, you're not engaged, which meant she was available. There was, Don did a story about computer dating, and Anne, who was feeling threatened, decides to get her own computer date. It was Rich Little, who was very much like Donald Hollinger. I mean, basically, she put in all of Donald's characteristics, and it was Don Hollinger. I mean, it was Rich Little, but somebody else very much like Don.
She did go on The Dating Game. Did she not?
She did.
Yeah, or a dating game-like show.
Dating game-like show. There was the English photographer.
Yes, and he was a reoccurring character. He did come back.
Actually, there are 3 episodes. The first time he finds her on the streets of New York, on the streets of New York. Second episode, a 2-parter, takes her to Hollywood for a photo shoot. Of course, Don goes to save her. He can't. Oh, she's with this man. I've got to go. Yeah, it's her. I've got to save her. And he shows up. And then the 3rd episode, the magazine has come out, different episode. The weirdest scene was in that episode. He would like her to return to London with him. And she has a dream. She can't decide between Don and the photographer, and she gets married to both of them.
Now that episode was innocent the way that
It was very.
it
Of
was
course.
very innocent. I am sure there were meetings.
Now remember, innocent. Let's talk about her parents for a moment.
Okay, that was Lou Parker played Lou Marie,
who was in several episodes. He really did not like his daughter living alone in New York. He was afraid of, are there men in her apartment? Is she going to lose her virginity? Can I say that on your show?
You can say that.
Yes, he was afraid of her losing her virginity. But it was all, he had a key to her apartment and would often come in unannounced, which even as a kid, I could not imagine as overprotect. My father was Lou Marie.
Yeah, your father was very much Lou Marie. I would say your father was much more accepting of me than Lou Marie was of Donald Hollinger.
Yes.
But I would say the character of Lou Marie and Archie Bunker made me think that all men would never find their daughters, girlfriends, or husbands good enough.
Yes.
That's how I thought. That's how all fathers were who had daughters. That no matter who they brought home, that they were never good enough. Even though they seemed like decent guys, they were just not going to be good enough.
And let's face it, Don Hollinger was the nicest guy in the world.
He was the nicest guy in the world. I was just watching, just before we set this up, I was watching an episode. I don't remember the title, but it involved a mouse. A mouse getting into Anne Marie's apartment.
Let's have a mouse around the house. Yes.
Yes, a mouse around the house. And Donald came over and
she calls him in the middle of the night to save her from the mouse.
Yes.
And
so she was allowed to be vulnerable as an independent woman. And
yes.
and Donald was allowed to be chivalrous and come into the rescue.
Yes.
Sometimes he took it on himself to rescue her. This time she wanted to be rescued.
But Don always had to leave.
He always had.
You had to see him walk out the door.
At the end of every episode, he would have to say,
or at the end of an act, end of a scene.
Yeah. So for this episode, Lou comes in unannounced, and Donald is there in a t-shirt and his boxer shorts because he slept there. She slept at his place.
Yes,
so
he couldn't even sleep on the couch. She had to go to his apartment, so they were not in the same residence.
They were not in the same residence together. Of course, the father sees him dressed that way and wants to take them to Baltimore where they could have a wedding. Shotgun optional. Yeah, that he assumed so much had transpired without ever using any of the words, but he made the assumption that something happened.
He was amazing.
And he had to, they had to get married. They had to immediately head to Baltimore where they could have a quick marriage. And he did talk about buying a shotgun.
Okay. Rosemary DeCamp, who was Mrs. Marie, was the peacemaker between Anne and her father and Don and her father. She only did 12 episodes during the entire run of the show.
You saw Lou a lot.
Oh, Lou, he was always barging into his daughter's apartment.
And the storyline, he was in Brewster, New York. He had the restaurant, but he would come down to Manhattan to get business done.
Yes.
So he would always stop in on his daughter.
One very sweet episode, he came down to take Anne to dinner for her birthday.
Actually, I want to bring up that mouse episode because the episode opens in the middle of the night. And I noticed Anne Marie was wearing her false eyelashes in bed.
Oh, she had a full face of makeup.
Yeah, she was. I think she even had eyeshadow when she got out of bed.
No, she was perfect.
She did not look like she ever takes that stuff off.
Again, that's the fantasy. Did little girls want to see what she really looked like? No, she always looked like this. Maybe that was false expectations for the rest of us, but we loved it.
So, but going back to the premise of the show, do you think that networks were worried that parents would have a problem with their little girl wanting to grow up, move out, move to the big city, leave home by themselves? That girls would see Anne Marie as a role model. Unfortunately, girls would see Anne Marie as a role model.
Maybe some of them did, but the role of women was starting to change. Maybe not as the show started, but certainly when the show ended in 1970, when, in fact,
Actually, March 19th, 1971 was the last episode.
The last episode, The Elevated Woman, she and Don are on, she is taking Don to a women's lib meeting.
So that did enter.
Yes.
Because a lot of, let's call them the mission statements for sitcoms of this time, is that you didn't want a lot of influences from current events. and sometimes, fashions and things like that, because they knew that these shows would be shown in reruns. So you wanted certain fashions. I'm sure whoever picked Don's suits in the first 4 seasons, they wanted something that would be timeless.
Well,
and then later,
Emery's clothes in the 60s very much
of the time. But you look
very much.
And then final season, Don got the sideburns. I think he was using the dry look in his hair. And
did he wear a Nehru jacket on occasion?
He must
Jerry,
have.
Jerry did. I remember Jerry in one at least once. And that last season, season 5, which for the true fans like myself, the show changed. It was like when she changed her hair from the flip and the bangs to the long hair. The show changed, and I've realized as an adult that girl was becoming that woman. Her skirts also dropped. The midi skirt, we went from the mini skirt to the midi skirts, and Anne-Marie was becoming more mature. She looked more mature. She was also an engaged woman in season 5.
So she got to change a little bit. They were planning. So this is the question.
Okay, remember the show? I mean, Marlo Thomas produced the show. She was the producer of the show.
Yes, it was Daisy Productions.
5 seasons.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the run of the show. Very, very much like the Dick Van Dyke Show. It was going to stop after 5 seasons.
And many shows have said, this is when we're going to end.
Yes.
And then when they get to that 5th season, they get lured into more. Marlo Thomas wanted to end at 4, correct?
That's what I understand.
And then they wanted to do a 5th. But what did you think of the way the show ended?
I remember as a little girl watching the show. It was now on Friday night, so I could see it. I guess I expected a wedding in the final episode. She and Don would finally get married. And there wasn't a wedding. And I learned later on that Marlo Thomas did not want that. She didn't want little girls to think that the be all and end all, your goal in life is to get married. And as I won't say I was disappointed, but it's what I expected. And I said, oh, okay. Also, that show was a retrospective of the series. I mean, a clip show, which I get it. 1970, there were no VCRs. You couldn't go out and buy the series on disc. There were no, today you can watch that girl on Antenna TV.
It's on Antenna TV, Tubi, and Amazon.
Oh, really?
You can watch it on Amazon Prime.
I know it was on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
That didn't exist. So I'm sure they had to remind the audience of some of these moments from the show, which were fantastic. I have never been a fan of this type of show.
You don't like the clip shows?
Yeah, you see me. We're watching TV together. It's a clip show. I will leave the room and go do something else. So that sort of bothered me.
Flashbacks, okay. Clip shows?
Flashbacks, fine, but a show made up of clips. They're on their way to the women's lib meeting. They are recounting their moments from their relationship, which it was a nice episode. Wasn't what I expected.
Now, there were usually a couple of patterns, I think, in that time period. If somebody got married, characters eventually got married. So, like,
those are big rating shows.
Those are big rating. Major Nelson and Jeannie marry.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yes.
And usually after that happens, they want that baby right away.
Boy, that show would not have been the same show.
Yeah, but they would want Bewitched. They get married in the first episode, but a lot of times they wouldn't want. The Fugitive kind of broke ground with having a finale. They wouldn't want something that, in the last episode they get married, because they would think that would hurt the reruns. That's the way a lot of the executives would have thought. Okay. That it would not, because you always use the Fugitive as the example. Well, everyone knows that he got exonerated, so they're not going to watch the reruns. Everyone knows she gets married at the end, so it's going to hurt the reruns. So, but in this case, do you think that the executives, they wanted a wedding to wrap it up?
I would think that, let's go back to the time. There's probably male executives probably wanted that ratings high. I don't know. I don't think Donna and Ann ever got married.
So weren't there plans for a reunion of sorts
Yes. And when Ted Bessel passed away,
at 57?
ugh,
Yeah.
too young, way too young. Plans for that, of course, went away. There's nobody else who could have been Don Hollinger.
They couldn't just have Anne Marie because Lou Parker
Actually
died like
very shortly
after the show
the show
ended.
wrapped.
Yeah.
So.
So the only, you could have had supporting characters, but you would have need to have Anne and Don. They would have had to have been together in this type of reunion. So that was lost. But you think they never would have gotten married?
I don't think they did. There were the 5th season. There were little things in that season that led me to believe that maybe they rethink the engagement. Not the top of my head, I can't tell you what they were. Maybe they were just things that I thought looking back as an adult. I'm sure as a kid, I was like waiting for a wedding on that last episode when the show wrapped up.
It wouldn't have happened. What do you think she would have done career-wise?
Okay. If my ending for that girl.
If you were going to come up with an ending.
Okay. Anne and Donna planning the wedding. When Anne finally gets her big break. Not on Broadway. She gets a national tour of a show. She's going to be on the road for a year. So now she needs to decide, are we going to go on with the wedding? Or do I go on the road with this show? Don, of course, would be very supportive. And I would like to see her take her chance on both her career and her relationship. That's where the show would end. And it's left totally open. Does she come back? Do they get married? Or does she grow away from Donald, away from her father, having the career success that she's looked for? And just leave it open. But I really wanted to see her have some success as an actress. In fact, my favorite episode, any of the episodes that deal with her career, my favorite was the Philadelphia story, because she does get a Broadway show. It goes
and it's on a run.
out of town tryouts. It's in Philadelphia. Don finagles an assignment to go cover this actress, her first Broadway show, and going to follow her through rehearsals to opening night. He's also asked to review it. Ooh. She was very good.
But it had some tender moments.
Anne Marie was very good. The show was horrible, and the show closed in Philadelphia. She got good notices from Variety, not just Don. Don also saw the show for what it was. It was horrible. The show, and everything nice. She got good notices. The show did not, and the show closed. But led me to believe, okay, so she does have talent. She can do this. She can get another show. I think that's what I would have liked to have seen in the end.
That she would have gone on tour.
That she would have gone on tour, been gone for about a year, and come back as actors do.
So,
in fact, she left town a couple of times. She came out to Los Angeles to audition. The English photographer brought her out here for the photo shoot. She even went to St. Louis.
Is that where Don's from?
With Don. She was going to do a show there. They were engaged. And she had a supporting role. She was offered the lead when the lead got ill over the understudy, who was a hometown girl. And it would mean not spending time, not meeting Don's family, which was very important.
The point, yeah.
Important. And she opts to eventually go spend the time with Don's family. She's not going to take the lead role. And to this day, I go, what?
Yeah, so I noticed that's
a simpler time.
A thing, because, not to shift, but in The Big Bang Theory, when Penny decides to quit acting and become a pharmaceutical rep, you did not like that choice for the character. You wanted her to continue pursuing her career. Yeah.
No.
So I can see that.
They're like, oh, acting is bad, everything else is good.
Yeah.
And then we know a lot of people who make a living at it, and I'm not talking about the big stars.
No, just people that are your working class actors that make a living. It is funny to see a show that's supposed to be set in New York, and then they make the trip to California, which because it's like they stepped outside the studio gate and they filmed there. So you would see
Larchmont Village in one episode.
Yeah.
Which was actually Brewster, New York.
Which was Brewster, New York.
In a flashback.
And you would see Larchmont Village. Sometimes, one time it was in an episode where she was a meter maid.
In Brewster, New York.
In Brewster, New York.
Yes.
And you're looking at it and it's like, okay, that's California. There's another time I saw Hollywood Boulevard. It's supposed to be New York, looking for the window washer. And I could see the RTD bus, which was the bus line of the time before it became the Metro.
Oh, wow.
And you could see the California license plates. But like,
and that's go ahead. But on TV, they told us it was New York. It was New York.
They were at a hot dog vendor. That was enough. The street vendor right there, so it looked like it was near the Pantages Theater. So they got the shots that they needed there. So they used and they shot around Lake Hollywood.
Yes, they did
in one episode, which I thought was the greatest sight gag the show ever had. Was the mud on Don. You know, I gave it a little gas, Donald. You do Marvel Thomas better than I do. But yeah, so you have the site. So you recognize the landmarks there. How many Anne Maries do you know in your life?
Several. Many of us who grew up watching Marlo Thomas as Anne Marie, she was able to pursue her dream no matter what their dream was. It wasn't to be your typical, stereotypical housewife mother. It was to get out and have a life of their own.
And the title was going to be Miss Independence, which was a name that Danny Thomas had for her when she was growing up, out of her personality. But it shifted.
One of the best gags on the show, My Sister's Keeper, where her family starred with her in the show. The last gag with Danny Thomas at the end is a priest bumps into her. Oh, excuse me, Father.
Yes.
Yes, my child.
Yes, my child. It was, and Danny Thomas later played himself in an episode with Milton Berle. But you had Tony Thomas and her sister.
Yes.
Yeah. So Tony Thomas, who would later be one of the top producers in Hollywood and television, working on some of the same studio lots that his father worked on.
Yeah, so keeping it in the family.
Keeping it in the family. So that girl shot at the Paramount lot, not too far from here. Not far from a lot of where Danny Thomas worked, a lot of the Desilu shows.
Yes.
So it's a wonderful part of that. That girl gag in the front, which became the traditional. At some point, they would have to say that girl, and that usually get Marlo Thomas in some unflattering pose.
Not necessarily,
but a lot. So for the time Carol O'Connor was on there, he said it in Italian.
Yeah. Great episode.
And I think one time it was that gorilla. But to get that freeze, that became one of the staples of the show, that you'd always get that. And that was only supposed to be in the first episode.
I'm glad they continued it.
They continued that. So we have your favorite episode. What is the takeaway from this show? Because this show is on at some point. It's on multiple platforms. It's still there. You have the box set. People want to see it. There are many shows from the time period and from the 70s, the 80s going on that were brilliant for its time, do not have the staying power. Why did this show have that type of staying power?
It's fun. It's a fun show, well acted, well directed, well written. And I think it's grounded in reality. Yes, it's a comedy, but the relationships are strong, and that carries it through.
And a lot of people said it's a precursor to Mary Tyler Moore. Or the Mary Tyler Moore show, I should say.
Well, they say that Marlo Thomas and that girl opened the door for all the other women.
All the other
single women who would come after her. So, Marlo Thomas, you are amazing. Thank you.
I think we can end it there. Read my blog. Listen to us on TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television. I'm Tony Figueroa, the child of television. This is my wife, Donna Allen-Figueroa, who is the best authority on that girl. You want to say it? Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.